Hi, welcome to the Keys to Therapy. Today we have Victoria. Hi, Victoria.
Hi.
You want to tell the audience a little bit about you? I know you're a repeat guest, but for those that didn't watch the first episode, who will right after this, then let
Yeah.
us know a little bit about who you are and what you do.
So I'm Victoria Mexcur. I am a licensed mental health therapist supervisor for the state of North Carolina. I'm also a licensed independent mental health therapist in the state of Nebraska. And I do, I'm also licensed in the substance use world. I have been doing this for about a little over 10 years. I did the math the other day and I was like, whoa,
That's a
okay.
little scary. Yeah, it's
That's a
exciting.
long
Like,
time.
yeah, resume
Um,
wise, you're like, ooh, a whole decade of
a
experience. And
whole
you're like,
decade.
oh, I'm older though now.
So yeah. So I've been doing it for a while. And I specialize in trauma, substance use, grief and resiliency tolerance, and include equines in in-person therapy sessions.
Yay. Well, that's what I wanted to talk to you about today because I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions about what that looks like and what that means.
Hmm.
And I feel like there's just not a lot of information out there. And so what people know might not actually be correct. Um,
Right.
it feels kind of like sometimes the information that's not always true, or like people get this one idea in their head and that's what spreads versus
Right.
knowing like the actual ins and outs of it. So if you can explain to everybody a little bit about what equine interactions are and how that's different from equine therapy, because that's the phrase that I think gets popularized a lot.
Yes. So equine therapy is an outdated terminology. There is actually something called the white paper that has been adopted by the American Counseling Association, the American Psychological Association, on what correct terminology is.
Hmm.
Equine interaction is the correct terms
Okay.
to use, or equine inclusion, because first and foremost, I'm the therapist.
Mhm.
So when we think about equine therapy as the term, we're saying that the equine, the horse or the donkey or the mule, are the therapists.
Mm.
And that kind of distorts some of the thought processes around it. It's just inaccurate terminology. I've actually had it where I've marketed that I do equine interactions, and people have said, "Oh, is that equine therapy? Like, do you include, like, what does that mean?" So it is just kind of one of those common things, because equine inclusion and equine interactions have a multitude of different ways of looking at it. You
Hmm.
have occupational therapists who include equines for mobility. You have speech and language that include
Mm.
equines to help the clients out. You've got disability management, you've got equine learning, horsemanship, and horse lessons,
Wow.
or horseback riding lessons. So it can kind of look in a multitude of ways. And so we have to be very careful with the language that we're using.
Mhm.
Um, on top of the fact that there are other people who are not licensed mental health clinicians saying that they provide equine therapy, but guess what? They're actually not therapists. So
Mm.
they legally and ethically shouldn't be doing that work
Yeah.
unless they're credentialed appropriately. So there is kind of more research, more knowledge, more communication around language accuracy.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense though, because I think sometimes people will say they'll attach therapy to a lot of different things, like,
Hmm.
oh, this is art therapy, but
Hmm.
there's no therapeutic component. It's just
Yeah.
art. Or they'll say like, this is my therapy. And I feel
Hmm.
like even that phrase has been kind of gaining more traction lately for anything, you know?
Exactly.
So, like, cooking's my therapy, or like people just keep attaching it. And I think sometimes there's the expectation that if somebody's offering equine therapy, that there's going to be a therapist there or this component
Mhm.
of healing and stuff like that. And
Yeah,
maybe the person's just marketing it wrong. So
exactly.
I
Yeah.
think, as my dog's here, I think that that's a good point. And something maybe people don't understand. So, like you've said with interactions, I feel like that also lets people understand a little bit more about
Yeah.
what is going to be happening. There will be some kind of animal interactions.
Correct. Yeah. And
Okay.
here, let's kind of add it a little bit. So the other terminologies that people will see is equine assisted. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so that kind of creates a whole nother philosophy. And it's not inappropriate. It's just not, it's like second tier, not accurate. Um, it's okay. It's just not preferred.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in saying equine assisted, that's suggesting that the equine has consent to participating. And if they're assisting, then they're kind of the same as me
Mm-hmm.
being the therapist. Um, so there's just nuances, to it that we kind of have to understand, like what our own ethical responsibilities are. I have ethical management of my equines and my
Mm-hmm.
clients, are my equines consenting to this? Or are they not? How do I manage that with clients who have trauma,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes based around consent? So it just kind of
Yeah.
is an interesting dynamic, and how we can kind of be appropriate with our terminology.
Oh, that makes sense. So if people are seeking that out, or they're looking for referrals maybe for their own clients, to make sure
Mhm.
that the person's using the right terminology, because if they are, then that's a good indicator that they know what they're talking about.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Hmm.
Well, what drew you to this work?
One, I love horses.
Number
um,
one.
Number one, horses have been involved in my life from get-go.
Mm,
I have absolutely loved them. I think that they're incredibly amazing and intuitive beings. And so I've always been the person to say, it's not about the thing, it's about the other thing.
mm,
So instead of doing like just normal talk therapy and using skills to like combat things like repeatedly over and over and over again, like let's blow it up a little bit and find different boxes or different opportunities to like experience the learning versus teaching the learning sometimes,
mhm.
in traditional therapy approaches. And so it just offers a different perspective in experience, where clients can kind of get out of stuck points, so to speak. Basically be able to do therapy without doing therapy so specifically, kind of take
Mhm.
the edge off.
Oh, yeah, and then how nice for you that you get to be around your
Yeah.
animals. Like,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah, I think sometimes we need some concrete metaphorical applications to stuff.
Mhm.
So if a horse or another animal out here is doing something, that could potentially create a metaphorical experience for the client that they get to see like right there concretely, contextually, and they get to take that, with them.
Yeah, well, that leads into my next question, which is, like, what are some of the benefits that you've seen when it comes to equine interactions and clients? Because I bet there's
Um,
a ton.
there's tons of them. So one, it kind of helps build rapport a little bit faster, because they're coming out to a place that doesn't look like an office. Um,
Mhm.
it just kind of immediately creates a breath of fresh air. Sometimes if they're learning something about the horses or how to interact with them, then they can apply that to how can I interact with other people
Mm.
and what can that kind of look like. Interestingly, walking a horse creates so many different applications that the client gets to create and practice and pay attention to when they're experiencing struggles in their own relationships or when their relationships are going really well. So that's kind of just a really helpful point. So rapport, um being able to learn something either about themselves or one of the equines. And the other is co-regulation.
Mm.
So horses are sentient somatic beings that have beautiful micro movements that can tell you when they're stressed out, that can tell you if they have pain points, can tell you different kinds of emotional things. Horses have 7 emotions. Um,
Mm.
but we only think that they have like 1 or 2.
Mhm.
But they actually are very emotional.
Oh.
And so we can kind of actually use horses to co-regulate or teach clients how to regulate by watching another horse regulate
Yeah.
in their emotions. It's so crazy cool. I have had clients with significant anxiety issues co-regulate with one of my horses. And they have to pay attention to what is the horse experiencing right now. Horses do a lot of beautiful self-soothing techniques when they're stressed out. And so they get to see that, hey, their stress is causing me stress. I need to let that out in a safe space.
Yeah. So what do horses do?
So horses will have wider eyes, so they'll have wrinkles above their eyes. They'll have flared nostrils. Their ears might kind of like pivot back, or they'll be very, very alert. Those are that's called pain face. They may not be experiencing physical pain. They might be experiencing physical pain or emotional pain in different emotional contexts. And so that's kind of what you can kind of notice. Self-soothing techniques, there'll be a lot of lip licking and like soft chewing. You might even have yawning. They might go and pivot one of their legs. They might drop their head. They might open their eyes. They might get distracted or dissociate, where you can kind of see like people just leave,
Mm-hmm.
So there's all kinds of micro movements that we don't pay attention about ourselves. So it makes it easier. Oh, they're not okay. My heart's racing.
That makes a lot of sense because I know, especially like animal lovers, you'll know what that dog's bark means,
Yep.
what that cat's movement is. Like you'll just kind of know your animals. And I feel like with a horse being so big,
Mm-hmm.
and you being in tune, it's going to make you almost like hyper aware of emotions in general and then maybe your own. So,
Yeah, it's almost like a re-partnership.
Mhm.
So, they partner with any of the horses, all of them, one of them. And then they get to kind of like re-partner and refigure out how they're working, within their own system and how they can be friends with themselves.
Mhm. Yeah, that's so cool. And when you were saying too, your specialties, like with trauma and with grief, I feel like a lot of times talk therapy is difficult for people who are dealing with either because they're talked out or they
Yep.
don't want to talk about
Yep.
whatever's happening, either like one extreme to the other. So I feel like putting them in a non-traditional setting,
Mhm.
letting them just kind of be with the animals and maybe not have to speak, but just be maybe more present with themselves for the first time in probably a long time. That may
Exactly. Yeah.
really helpful. And like you said, the rapport building between you and the client as well.
Yeah. The horses, a lot of the times, and some of the other animals that are here have been very representational of boundary crossings because of the fact that my animals are so friendly
Mhm.
and feel safe in this environment, they're going to go up and investigate. And sometimes they might, they're 1,100 pounds. So they're investigating is a
Yeah.
little bit invasive. And so how can we maintain a safe environment when, say, for instance, my trauma invades me,
Mhm.
my triggers invade me? How can we regulate that? What do
Yeah.
I need to do to maintain a safe space when I see an 1,100-pound animal coming towards me?
There's that metaphor part you were talking about
Exactly.
earlier. That's exactly it. And figuring out like how to deal with those stressors as they come, realize not every single thing that comes your way is a threat, like stuff like
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that's awesome. So
Representationally, I think because I have a very diverse herd,
mhm.
um, they all have very different personalities, and the types of horses that the clients gravitate towards
Yeah.
usually pays a lot to either their trauma, the struggles that they're going through, or their personality conflicts.
Hmm.
Um, it's interesting how many people love the littlest one
Oh
who
yeah.
is very avoidant,
Yeah.
has a lot of his own trauma history. And yeah, so he just doesn't like people, and the people who don't like people like him.
It's like the mood ring.
Yeah,
You're like, this one means this. And like people are
yeah,
attracted to that color or something.
exactly.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's so cute. He is a little cutie.
he
So
is adorable. He's
Yeah.
actually been healing so much here as of late.
Oh,
He now walks up to people,
oh my
sees them
God.
as oh yeah, lots of huge improvements in his own mental
Yeah.
health in the last, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 months. He lets men come up to him. Those were pain points for him when I first got him. And yeah, now he's a big chatty horse,
Oh my gosh.
likes to yell and
Wow.
tell people, hey, I'm over here. Um,
Oh my gosh. Cause yeah, when there was a consult group that we were a part of and we went to Victoria's Farm
mhm,
and got to see them and he was all the way off to the distance. Like I
yep.
think one person may have petted him and then he kicked or something. It was like, no thanks, I'm done. Like we
Yep.
were good for those 10 seconds I let you pet me, but he wasn't super friendly. So
No. Yeah, he's,
oh,
I think, now realizing that people are safe. I've been able to actually, he's been wanting to be included in wanting to be included in, sessions. He lets me put his halter and lead rope on him
oh
without
my
any
God.
issues. I mean, just night and day difference.
Wow.
So just even in saying that, like sometimes just having safety
Mm-hmm.
and meeting, where he's at, I'll tell clients that story,
Yeah.
because hey, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be better. You don't have to, like, this took a year and a half almost of, of shifting, and he gets to reap the benefit at this point.
Right. And if can you tell everybody like briefly what his
Yeah.
background is so then they can
Um,
see why this journey is so big?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Alfie is a mini pony cross. I don't really know what he is. I had bought him from someone who had bought him from a carnival,
Mm.
situation. So he was a horse that was used for pony rides, that cart thing that just goes around and around and around. So his job was almost 12 to 16 hours a day,
Mm.
giving people rides, not having consent, to do that, was really just put to work. And he was fed funnel cakes and lemonade as part of like the entertainment of, here's this
Oh my
cute
God.
fluffy pony, that is getting put to work. So when this person had bought him for her children as he was, kind of phasing out. The kids kind of like grew up and stuff. But even then, like it was a beautiful setup that he had, very safe kind of thing. But the idea was that he's still a working animal, which in part is true. Horses, that's kind of part of our dynamic.
Hmm.
Um, but the minute that I went to halter him, he was like, no, you're going to put me to work. So I literally just left him, out in pasture for several months. We built up our trust system. I still had to halter him to do some of his vet care and, just normal maintenance types of things. Um, but I just basically let him be for a really long time. I told people, hey, don't mess with him. Don't even bother interacting with him. Because usually when people come over, they're like, oh my God, he's so cute. I love him. Let me just play with his mane. It's just so
Hmm.
fluffy. That is part of his trauma, is being the cute one that people got to mess with, and he couldn't do anything about it. So one of the things that we practiced was, hey, you get to leave whenever you want.
Yeah.
So anytime that I would go out into the pasture and do anything, I just ignore him because that's what he wanted. um or if I needed to do something with him and he's like, no, not right now, okay, you can leave. And I think just having that was a huge benefit.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, just making him a horse again.
Hmm. Yeah. Oh
So
my gosh. But as you're sharing that, I can hear all the people stuff.
yeah,
It's like parallel, you know?
exactly.
There's so much there that I feel like you can even just using the horses stories can
Hmm.
help the people who are
Yeah,
coming through. And also like when you said it, a year and a half of working with him, it's like I think sometimes people who are grieving or people who've experienced
yeah,
trauma, feel like there's this invisible timeline that they're supposed to be
Yeah.
following. Well, the person died 3 months ago. I should be doing better. Well, it's been 6 months. It's been a year, and they kind of feel like their things should be sped up. But I think his story shows like healing takes time.
Exactly. Yeah,
Mm,
absolutely. Yeah. And he's just, really precious. The other thing that he's kind of taught me is that boundaries are okay.
mhm,
You get to actually like affirm them. And I think one of the biggest blessings that I get to see is that I'm also his advocate
mhm,
in those kinds of things. I've had a number of family members, not shortly after, but after I had him, say, "Oh my gosh, okay, can my kid come over and ride?" And I'm
mm,
like, "No, actually, he's retired. That's not something that he's here for." "Oh, well, can't I just like put my kid?" No.
yeah.
Um, no. And so I think I got a little bit braver to
Mhm,
also advocate for him. And I think that can cross section very nicely with advocating for clients,
mhm,
and what would be helpful for them. I kind of think that equine interactions is a little bit more modeling behavior.
mhm,
Types of situations, if I say no, I actually really mean it,
mhm.
and other people can benefit from hearing no. Oh,
Yeah.
my therapist said no. Okay.
To their family too, at that. It said no.
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's a hard no.
It is. It's so good though. And I can also see like for clients, I think sometimes people in general tend to be better advocates at times for others versus
Mhm,
themselves.
mhm.
But I think that that's even like have building that advocacy and understanding that it's okay to say no would be so great with an animal because maybe they'll start feeling protective of
Yes.
the animal. And so those instincts will come in. So even if
Yep.
they're not asserting the boundary originally for themselves, you're going to get that practice with
Yeah.
understanding the equines or whichever other animal they're interacting.
Yeah. Mhm.
So cool. So, and I mean, it sounds like you've seen a lot of benefit when it's come
Yeah.
to clients so is there a typical process that you do? Like, obviously people would come to you because they
Mhm.
know that you offer this, but
Yep. Mhm.
is there like a step process of, because I'm sure there's gonna be some people are like, I'm nervous, but I want to do this.
Mhm.
And other people that are like, where are the
Yeah.
ponies?
Yeah.
So what does it look like for you for the
So
intake?
I wind up actually giving a disclaimer to every new client, especially the ones that say, "Oh, you do equine therapy." I don't correct them because it just doesn't help me out. That's one thing. But the other is I tell them, "You and I will meet for about a month. I'll introduce you to them, but we won't work with them until I've figured out that this is a good fit for you."
Okay.
Um, because I think people do have that preconceived idea that this is so exciting. I get to ride a horse and do
Yeah.
therapy or, whatever else. And no one rides my horses. But
Boundary.
two of them I do.
Yeah.
Um, so just kind of working through some of maybe the biases that
Mhm.
they might have. I do introduce them. So my horses live out in a pasture. They have certain levels of freedoms. So we'll just meet them at the fence, and I'll tell them a little bit of a backstory. We might do session outside, on the other side of the fence. Um, and so we might just do it that way. I have
Mm.
people who don't, it's so funny because I'm thinking about it. I have a lot of clients who actually don't want to interact with them, but just knowing that they're outside feels really good.
Yeah.
Or that it's not a traditional office
Mhm.
setting. So I think they just like that, but don't really care to interact with them, but they'll ask me about them.
Yeah.
We will interact in that
That's
conversation
cute.
way.
That's
So
their distance where they're like, "I wanna see him," or like wave from
yeah,
afar, then I'm good.
yeah, exactly. So it's funny how it transitions.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Well, for therapists that are interested in learning more about equine interactions,
Yeah.
where can they go or what do you suggest that they do?
A couple of things. One, feel free to reach out to me. There's a wonderful network of people that I know, that and can kind of offer the most ethically appropriate conversations. I think one of the things to kind of consider, especially when it comes to inclusion of equines or any animal, is the philosophy around it.
Mm,
Um, or the philosophical models that kind of are out there. A few of the names are Egala, Path, Denver University, Natural Lifemanship. Those are kind of like the big prominent names, but they all offer different philosophical modalities
Okay.
on how they interact with the horses, or how horses are potentially treated, kind of similar, but they're just different philosophies. I graduated after my master's a few years ago. When I was getting into this, I said I needed to be as ethically and as evidence-based as I possibly could. So I picked the University of Denver, Colorado. They have a postmaster's certificate for licensed mental health therapists. You have to be licensed to participate in the program. It's a 2-year deal. There's clinical requirements, there's workshops, there's internship that I had to do in order to get the credential, background. I thought that was necessary to be able to be as ethically sound as I possibly could. Yeah, there were like 52 CEs, so I was good for the rest of the year.
Wow. Well, that's good. That's like a double bonus.
Yeah, it counted.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah,
appreciate you like sharing so much because again,
yeah,
everybody hears equine therapy and they think
yeah.
you're riding a horse, or like some of the things that you've mentioned before about the stereotypes with they're just talking to you brushing the horse the entire time that they're in session, or
Right,
equine therapy is more for, I've seen people market a lot with like children on the spectrum or stuff like
right.
that and not fully understand how somebody with grief would benefit from
Mhm.
something like this, but the way you explained it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, there are those stigmas that say, hey, this is just for intellectual disabilities, occupational therapy and
Mhm.
kids. Um, I get so many comments and asked, when I'm like referral seeking, do you work with children, or do you work with,
Mhm.
people with intellectual disabilities? And I'm like, no, actually, I don't. I just work with adults.
Yeah.
Oh, well, why are horses a thing? I'm like, well, actually.
We need them, okay?
Yeah.
So, plus I
Yeah.
feel like there's a lot of people, I've been seeing a lot of stuff recently about like inner child work.
Hmm.
So like, oh my gosh, so much of that can get tapped into too, especially when you're talking about trauma or even I
Yeah.
guess grief as well, depending on who they lost and when in their lives. Like
Hmm.
there's a lot there that could be healed.
Yeah. There's a lot of communication stuff.
Mhm.
Horses are very direct, but soft. Like you have to be gentle,
Mhm.
and positive with things. Like if you're overly controlling or overly aggressive, like they're gonna notice that, okay, why doesn't that work? And so there are so many different applications that people just aren't necessarily aware of,
Yeah.
um, in making these things kind of happen. Some people just like grooming.
Yeah.
I've had so many clients who are like, I just want to come out, talk to you while I'm brushing.
Mhm.
Okay.
Oh yeah, that'd be me. I'm like, I brush my ponytail. Yours is like way better. Like I'm
Yeah.
here for this.
There was an interesting example in kind of like one of the mindfulness workshops that I've done. Um, the more distracted a person gets, the more vigorous the brushing is. And
Ah,
then the horses kind of start being like, okay, like you're kind of brushing a little bit too
yeah.
hard. So the client, hey, pay attention to what you're doing,
Mhm.
like you're getting, emphatic, you're very enthusiastic. What's the horse telling you right now? Oh,
Yeah.
I have to slow down. Okay. So
Mm,
it's a mindfulness kind of thing that's really cool.
that is cool. I wouldn't have thought about that, but that makes a lot of sense. So it makes them stay present,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to get a lot of dissociation with trauma.
Yes.
That's really cool. Yeah. So there's so many benefits, it sounds like, and a lot of ways that people can educate themselves on it that
Hmm.
maybe those resources aren't as widely known. So
Hmm. Yeah,
really
absolutely.
helpful.
Yeah. Yeah,
Great.
for sure.
Well, I'm going to link all of Victoria's information below. So follow her, especially her Instagram, because there's animal pictures and
Yeah.
there's more animals than just the horses.
Hmm.
So what are you up to now? I know Miss Lula May, the pig.
Yep. I got Lula May, my potbelly pig. She is a riot. She loves therapy. She
Oh,
will sit with every single client that we have outside. Sometimes you can hear her in my like outside my office, just walking down
like, come
down.
on, guys.
Come on, I hear you in there. Um,
Cute.
no, she does a beautiful job at helping with like regulation kinds of things. She has to have very positive interactions. If people are very anxious, she will tell you, hey, we
Mm,
need to kind of chill it. And then she'll fall asleep. So she likes to be snuggled and, you
mm,
know, and it's really, really cool. I essentially have to tell clients, hey, if we sit outside, the potbelly pig is going to sit next to you or like on your feet to help
yeah.
give you pressure if you're anxious.
Oh,
Um, there are so many people who love her. And then obviously the horses and the
yeah.
chickens, and they kind of randomly show up.
That's awesome. Yeah. So
Yeah,
it's definitely a farm.
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always my pleasure to come see you. Plus, I get to
Yay.
chat with you.
I know. So it's double exciting.
Yeah.
So what I'd love to do too, if you can send me some pictures of the horses
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
then I'll add them to the end of the video so everybody can see each one
Yeah.
and Lula too with the sunglasses.
Yeah.
So they could know like, oh, here's the whole crew. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And they have professional headshots. So
oh,
they're snazzy.
oh my gosh, they're so fancy. Go
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
But yes, so for everybody watching, go ahead and follow all the stuff below. That way you can see more pictures of the animals. I recently started a Facebook group for new therapists, so that link's below too if you guys want to join it. And I will see you next episode. Thanks again, Victoria.
Bye.
Bye.